You're home again. I'm glad you kept the key. Been waiting here. It seems a million years to me. But hush now. I know you're all cried out. It's all right. Inside I've had no doubt about your love for me. I can see behind the tears. I'm certain of the way we feel, and given time the hurt will heal. You're home again, so won't you close the door? Stay here with me, and we'll forget what's gone before. Just hold me tight. Our love is gonna make it right. Put shadows way beyond recall. The ghost has almost gone. Fallen angel, I'll forgive you anything. You can't help the things you do. Now something's gotten hold of you. Fallen angel, got a demon in your soul. And later when the fever's gone,
Gotta have heart. All you really need is heart. When the odds are saying you'll never win, that's when the grin should start. You've gotta have hope. Mustn't sit around and moan. Nothing's half as bad as it may appear. Wait till next year and hope. When your luck is batting zero, get your chin up off the floor. Mister, you can be a hero. You can open any door. There's nothing to it but to do it. You gotta have heart. Miles and miles and miles of heart. Oh, it's fine to be a genius, of course, but keep that old horse before the cart.
From the ancient words of the Psalms. Shaviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini bal emot. Lachen samach libi v'yagel kvodi af bisari yishkon lavetach. I have set the eternal before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult, my soul rejoice, for my being is secure. For you, O God, will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. And as well, these words from the Psalms. Esa enai el he'ari me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai osei shamayim va'aretz. Al yitein lamot raglecha ayanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha. Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka. Lo yarech balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeitecha uvoecha me'ata v'ad olam. I lift up my eyes unto the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. The Lord will not let your foot give way. Your protector does not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. For the Lord is your guardian, God, your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from harm. God will guard your soul, your going out and your coming forth, now and forever. We each come to this moment with the sadness that we bring. A sadness painted first with numbness. We were, so many of us, shocked when we learned of the news. Rick was always so filled with life, one who owned the room, one whose laughter and wit would fill that room, and one whose larger-than-life personality would warm that room. Whether that room was a Broadway theater, a stadium, or a conversation with him and with someone else, or in his beloved lifelong home on Rose Hill Avenue. Perhaps what filled us with surprise was not only the suddenness of the loss, but the idea that as full as Rick lived his life, that it could suddenly leave us. Life was always measured by adventure after adventure for Rick Steiner. It was celebrated in its many twists and turns. It was painted with the boldest of hues. And let us say plainly that in all the ways we saw him live that life, there was nothing conventional about Rick's way. In his life's work, in his achievements, in his friendships. And so it's fitting that this memorial tribute, to which we all bring those feelings of sadness and surprise, is also characteristically and fittingly unconventional. Rick made his own rules. He faced each adventure with a fullness of spirit and larger-than-life perspective. And if the great poet said, if two roads diverge in a yellow wood, Rick took not only the one less traveled, but he made his own third path, a road that others did not even see, never one to follow anyone else's plan. But whatever path it was that Rick was on, at any moment in time, he was always real, always genuine. He never changed who he was, no matter what the success, no matter what the challenge, no matter who he was with. He was generous and giving of heart to so many friends, with the deepest of loyalty to past relationships and a great love of being with people. And if he could travel his own road each day as he did, it was because he was always anchored with a depth of his sense of family and a strong sense of self, a rooted sense of place, as Cincinnati was for him, and his giving spirit. We will miss Rick's unique approach to life, his love of life, his deep capacity for friendship, and his love for you, his family. We will miss all of that, but we will remember it, we will celebrate it, we will learn from it. I now would like to call upon Rick's brother Corky to offer a few words and introduce our speakers.
What a difference a day makes. 5 days before his 70th birthday. When you leave from here, go home, hug someone. It makes a difference. Could we dim the lights to coincide? And as a gesture from Rocco and Debbie, the lights on Broadway were dimmed at the August Wilson Theater. And let's just pause for a moment to reflect on our own thoughts. If I may, I'd like to call up our respective families, Jacqueline Ace and Duke, Aaron, Meredith, Ricky, and Joey. Would you please come forward? I'd like to introduce Rick's family, if they can get organized. And if you would just step forward, and then we'll all go down back in our seats together. Rick's family: Jacqueline, elementary education; Ace, Indiana; Duke, Indian Hill. Our family: Meredith, Levin, education, reform in New York. By the way, I have to read these things. That's it. Anyway, Rick Steiner, Wright State Medical School, Dayton, Ohio. Joey Steiner, University of Cincinnati, MBA program. Meredith, I got everybody?
Yeah, you're good.
Got everybody? Yeah. Aaron Arnzen, are you with us? No, okay. And Aaron Arnzen, who apparently was unable to get the flight from California. Would you guys please be seated? Rick was a rare human being, but family always came first. Rick ran in multiple circles And today's attendance is a real tribute to this. The importance of family was instilled in us naturally within the Kenner Toy Company. Brothers Al, Phil, Joe, and Al's son Bob, and many of Al's family are here with us today, as are Joe Steiner's family. But from the Kenner family, the fine arts community, Walnut Hills High School, the Cincinnati Reds, and many others. So it was only natural that Rick and I learned from the three Steiner brothers the importance of family. Dr. Cameron stole one of my lines. You must have heard me. Rick opted for another route, as Kenner and our three speakers will reflect. Each will share in their own respective vignettes love, admiration, and warmth for my brother. And if you all who are speakers will come up, please, and just sit right up here, I'd appreciate it. Our first speaker, Rocco, and each of our speakers will introduce themselves. And if you as the speakers will come up here now and sit up here, I'd appreciate it. From Rocco, beginning at kids camp, and from the fine arts world and theater and Broadway, John Osher, neighborhood friend, college colleagues, business associates, and investment partners, and Marty Brennaman, Baseball Hall of Fame announcer, and dear, dear friend. You guys all made it. Thanks to each and every one of you here today, both individually and collectively, for contributing to this tribute to my brother. Rocco, you lead off. John, you follow Rocco. And Marty, you hit the home run.
Well, if Rick were standing where I'm standing right now, I know just what he'd say, because he's always making an allusion to something else. He would quote or paraphrase the king in Big River, who when he's in a church and addresses all the mourners, says to them, "I'm so grateful to all of you gathered here for my funeral orgy." The next thing Rick would do, if he were standing here, he would look out around the house, and he would feel very, very good, and he would say, "Good box office. Standing room only. We could do premium ticketing." But Rick, don't worry, even if the attendance had been sparse, Corky and I would have papered the house. Rick's English was Rick's second language. His first language, I don't know what you would call it, Ricklish. It wasn't like anybody else's language. It was basically bad puns, plays on words, and allusions that most people would have no idea what he's referring to or talking about. Very recent case in point, when Rick was, when he had pneumonia before he went in for the operation, I saw him a couple times and talked to him on the phone, and he had this cough. So he immediately started saying, and there's a Roger, of course there's always a Roger Miller song, there's a Roger Miller song called "Pardon This Coffin," about a burial. But Rick was coughing, so he kept going around saying, "Pardon this coffin." And of course, Rick, most of all, right now, would delegate me to say to all of you on his behalf, "Pardon this coffin." But everything that Rick said was off center, had some other reference or some other meaning. We would go into a restaurant and he would say to the maitre d', "I've certain reservations," or if you asked him how he was, he wouldn't say fine. He would quote one of the princes in Into the Woods, who said, "I remain well." And everything was a odd name. You baseball fans are in the room. There are many of you. There was an outfielder for the Detroit Tigers named Cecil Fielder, and To Rick, yeah, he was never Cecil Fielder. He was always Cecil B. de Fielder. And you had to know, always when talking to Rick, you had to have command of several different worlds, several different points of reference. He was always making some kind of oddball allusion or crazy pun. His language, he was funny, but he never told a joke. He didn't have a proper epigram in him. He didn't tell stories. He just saw everything in this kind of wacky bias that he had about everything. Death was not death to Rick; it was death, because that's the way it was referred to by Franz Liebken in our show, The Producers. And he was elusive. That was his style. When Rick started out as a producer, and he saw this is long before we ever did The Producers. There was the movie The Producers, and when Rick saw Max Bialystock in that movie, he knew that he had seen his alter ego. And when Rick would crank up for a show, he would get him. He had to go out and raise money, and he would get in shape, and he would put on his best clothes, such as they were, and he would gear himself up, and he would say, "And now Max Bialystock launches himself into little old lady land." And the thing about Rick, and I think one of the reasons he was so successful, is because he really loved those little old ladies. He loved them all, and they loved him. I was with Rick about a week or two before he went in for the operation. We went to a restaurant that he had invested in, and he pointed out to me a 100-year-old woman, and he knew her whole life history. He knew her family, her friends. He knew everything about her. He loved the little old ladies, and the little old ladies loved him, no question. But I'm going to reveal a secret here. Please don't let it go out of this room. I'd appreciate that. But Rick not only loved the little old ladies, he loved ladies that weren't so little, and in some cases weren't so old. He really, I remember when I was, we go back to summer camp together when we were both junior counselors, and on our days off, I would go into town with Rick, and just by hanging around him, I could meet girls, and that's how I met most of the girls I met for 20 years, just by being around Rick, because he'd always have them bring their friends, and therefore I would be able to meet them. And Rick had so many girlfriends over the years, and Rick was both incredibly generous and incredibly cheap, if those two things can coexist. When he'd break up with a girl, he would feel terrible about it, because he was a compassionate and good person. So what happened in many of the cases, he would give them a car, but as one of the girls pointed out to me, it was always a used car. I used to wonder what was it about Rick that was so attractive to all these girls. Because they weren't attracted to me. They were only attracted to me because I was with him. And so I did a poll, a pretty extensive poll, like maybe 24 people in the poll. And I said, what's the quality about him? And none of them, not one of them, said it was his looks. And not one, said it was because he was such a sharp dresser. Not one. But they all said that he was funny, and he was funny, and he saw the world in his own funny, dorky, goofy, idiosyncratic way. Now, I should point out that all these girls were BJ. That's not an obscene expression, shorthand. That is before Jan. And Jan was the love of his life. He was the love of Jan's life. They had a tumultuous relationship, I think, but a wonderful, passionate relationship. They were incredibly in love with each other, incredibly passionate about each other. After Jan, there were really no other women that counted. They had the most engaged, passionate, loving relationship. There was only one problem with it. They didn't get along that well. That was the only issue. Now I don't know the exact numbers here, but by my reckoning, Jan and Rick got married and divorced and married and divorced and married and divorced 17 times, roughly. But the last time I saw them together, they were, I think, more together than they ever had been before. Rick was incredibly passionate about Jan. Rick was passionate and incredibly loving about his family. Phil and Desiree, of course, that I had the good fortune to have known because Rick and I go back so far. Corky, I think Rick would give me permission to say, Corky, that he loved you like a brother. And especially, he was especially loving and dedicated to his friends. I think friendship was what Rick Steiner was all about from the beginning. Our friendship began when we were about 17, 18 years old at camp, as I said, and we each had groups of kids that we took on canoe trips, and on one of the trips, my trip went out first, and Rick's trip was about a day behind, and we would catch up, overlap for a day, and I'd go ahead, and he would catch up. The first night, our group left a tent at the campsite. Rick picked up our tent, delivered it back to us, down the road. Later, we left a wanigan, which is the box that you keep the food in. He picked up the wanigan, gave it back. And really, Rick had been picking up my tent and my wanigan for the next 50 years. During the financial crisis, when I got margin calls, Rick was there with a check. And that happened more than once. He was an incredible friend when you needed him. And he was the kind of friend who not only would be generous with you and help you out, but would worry about you. Just in our very last meeting, Debbie and I were with Rick on just last Monday, 6 days ago or whatever. And he took Debbie aside. He kind of gave her the list of the things that he was worried about me. My finances, my health, my marriage, whatever it would be. Rick was concerned. He took friendship very, very seriously. Friendship was everything to him. And we would talk about friendship and we would reflect on it. And friendship really is the one thing in life that actually gets better as we get older. The rest of the things, we don't get better at sex as we get older. We don't run faster. We don't remember better. Almost everything in life gets worse except friendships. They get better over time and they build. And the saddest thing about this for me is that our friendship, after all these years, was getting better and better until it stopped. And I'd like to just close. I was thinking, what would I like to close with? And I know that Rick would like it to be an allusion to some song, because he was always alluding to some song somewhere, usually an obscure one that nobody had ever heard. And I thought, well, what do we have from Big River? And there were wonderful scenes in that show, which we'd like to recall. Rick was a very, very sentimental person, as we all know. He was not introspective. He was a psychiatrist's nightmare. He didn't like to talk about himself or think about himself. But he would be very sentimental, and every once in a while he would be amazed at all the things that we had done and all the things that happened to us, and he would look at me and he'd say, "It's all on account of Huck." And he was very sentimental about that, our first show, Big River. And I was thinking of one of our favorite songs in that show, with lines that go, when the sun goes down in the south and the full moon's starting to rise, you can't imagine the menagerie created by a couple of guys. And we always felt that way. We always felt we were on an adventure and doing something fun. But I think the real way for me to wrap this up is to cite, since we're, it's always going to be a Roger Miller song probably. But our favorite, we each had a dozen favorite Roger Miller songs. But his favorite and my favorite was a song that's not very well known by Roger, called "Old Friends," and it goes like this: Lord, when all my work is done, bless my life and grant me one old friend, just one old friend.
Do we have a bench I can stand on? I told Corky, no matter what, don't let me speak after Rocco. You know, I was at a restaurant with Rick 2 weeks ago, and he pointed out the old lady. And I think she was a plant. Told me her whole history also. He knew one old lady, and I think he paid her. Let me find my glasses. Corky said I have 3 minutes to speak, and Rocco took them. Ricky and I have been best friends for about 64 years, and it's very hard to put 64 years into a few minutes. And it's hard not to cry and talk and cry. I'll miss him. You know, we spoke every week. I'd call him up and I'd say, Ricky, and he'd go, Johnny, every week. And when we were roommates in college, I'd say, good night, Ricky, and he'd go, good night, John, and together we say, and good night for Texaco. Some of you older people might remember from the news. It's a terrible loss for all of us. I've never been at a funeral where everybody here loved the person. This is not just people who are here out of obligation. Everybody here loved Ricky. Reading about it in the New York Times, I never, you know, you look at his whole life and say, oh my God, what a person he was. I feel particularly terrible for Jan and AC and Dookie. He always called them AC and Dookie. Ricky was the world's best father. He really took them to school, picked them up. I never saw a father like Ricky. Maybe it is better to become a father at 50. Maybe you know a little bit more. Ricky has all his Broadway friends, his Cincinnati Reds friends, his poker friends, his high school friends. I had 30 friends in high school. Ricky was best friends with all 300 in our class. And they're probably all here. I met Ricky for the first time when he was about 6. He moved to Rose Hill, and we were in the middle of a snowball fight. And Jay Dunkelman, who did become a good friend, but he was kind of a bully then, he hit him in the face with a snowball. And that was right after he stuck a snowball down the back of my pants. And we have been allies ever since, and we have watched each other's backs our whole lives. When we went to high school together and went to grade school together, I used to go to his house every day, and we would play Monopoly in the afternoon until 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, Rick's mom made him take a bath. Why, I don't know. We went on till they said we went to grade school, we went to high school. Ricky and Randy was here tonight. We took the train up to Wisconsin for our freshman year, played poker all night. We took all Randy's money, and I swear we gave it back to him. Randy told me last night we didn't. We were roommates in college. We shared a house in Boston and Lexington. We spoke to each other every single week for our whole lives. I can't imagine having a better friend. Many of you, all of us, probably read the article in the New York Times, and it was pretty amazing. And you read all the stuff that he did, and he never did what anyone told him. He just did what he wanted. Ricky lived his life. I mean, I remember he drove a Lincoln for 20 years and just repainted it every 2 years. But more important than all of these achievements, which were amazing, was Rick's kindness. Ricky was really a kind person, and he did so many things that people didn't know about. He took care of so many of his friends. He took care of friends financially, took care of friends in so many different ways that he never told anybody. I only find out things like this by literally pulling it from him. He wasn't looking for trophies. He wasn't looking to be honored for all the things that he used to do. He was a champion for all of us in our class of '64. He ran every reunion. He wrote the reunion. He was the speaker in the reunion, and he paid for the reunion. He brought our class together. As I said, I had 30 friends that I knew in high school, but from Ricky's reunions, I learned to have 300 friends. He brought everybody together. I don't even remember him being such a big deal in high school. But he became the biggest deal in our high school. I had breakfast with Ricky about 3 weeks ago, the week before his surgery, and I didn't think he was going to die. But for the first time in my life, I told him I loved him, and he told me he'd love me. And I will always miss you, Ricky. Thanks.
Every time I think about him, I laugh. Honest to goodness. I want to first thank the family. When I got the bad news on Thursday, the first thing I thought of was, if anybody's going to represent baseball, I prayed that Corky would call me and ask me to say some things about Rick. And God bless you, you did. Someone once said that you can count your true friends on one hand. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but I know this. He's right there. I'm the one of the three that has known Rick the shortest amount of time. I'll never forget, back in the early 90s, it might have been the late 80s, we got on this kick in the radio booth of decorating the booth with Elvis Presley memorabilia. I mean, Joe Nuxall didn't know Elvis Presley from Joe Smith. But he humored me, and one night I made a comment on the air, would it be great if people send in Elvis Presley artifacts with the understanding that you're not going to get them back, but we will decorate the booth? Well, it overwhelmed us. In fact, CNN and some of the news stations would go to commercial break as a bumper. They would show the booth because it really looked good. So one day I get a call, and this fella says, I'd like to come up to the radio booth and introduce myself, and I have something for you. And I said, well, that's fine. What's your name? He said, Rick Steiner. And so he came up to the booth, and he came up with the express purpose of giving me some CDs, one of which was entitled Elvis Presley Sings Turner and Dozier, who was one of the great writing tandems in the history of music. And that began the friendship. We had three things in common: 50s and 60s rock and roll music. He would call me periodically and he would name a song. Who sang it? Broadway, he introduced me to. And also, of course, baseball. I don't know of a greater fan in the history of the game than Rick Steiner was. And not only was he a fan, but he ultimately put his money where his mouth was, because he became part of the ownership group of our ball club after a lot of years in which he owned minor league franchises, and got a chance to realize his dream by being a part not only of an ownership of a baseball team, but the ownership of a team that he grew up watching and living and dying with. in my lifetime, and Rocco mentioned the D word as it came to marital discord or whatever the case might be, but I've been down that road 3 times, and it's been a very expensive road for me. And thank God the 3rd time around I hit the jackpot. But the 2nd time, I was out and about, and I had nowhere to live. And he called me one day, and he said, "You need a place to live?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I want you to move into my house in Indian Hill because the boys and I are going to be in Minnesota. And you can live there until we come back in August. And then you move over to Rose Hill." I didn't know what Rose Hill was. I knew what the heck Indian Hill was. And so that works for me. So I moved into the house, which probably from end to end was 2 football fields long. And you could lose your breath running from one end to the other. But boy, did I like it. Swimming pool and the whole 9 yards. And so now he comes back, Ace and Duke and Rick, and he said, "You got to go to Rose Hill." I said, "Okay." So I go to Rose Hill. I'm scared to death. I'm convinced I'm going to be killed. But I got to be honest with you. There is nobody who's lived in that house longer as a wayward soul than I did. I lived there over 2 years. And had I not met Amanda and fallen in love and gotten married, I would have been Eugene Katona revisited. I'd still be there because there's no one on the face of this earth that loved living at 4044 Rose Hill Avenue like I did. I thought it was the greatest place on earth. I had Eugene to talk to. I had Rick every day. All I had to do was get up in the morning and take a shower and get dressed and go down to the office. Or he would come up and we would talk baseball. And I don't care whether it was Dusty Baker or whoever was managing the club, he'd say, "We got to talk about what happened last night." I said, "Okay, we'll talk about what happened last night." And it went on and on and on like that. And I, as I said, no one enjoyed Rose Hill Avenue like I did. It's one of the great, the two years stand out in my life as living there and getting to know him better and better and better and better. And Rocco and Johnny both said the same thing. It was all about friendships with him. And if you were his friend, there was no bounds beyond which he would not go to let you know daily and absolutely ask for nothing in return. He was the kindest, most giving person I think I've ever known. And I thank God every day for the fact that we had the years that we had with him. He made me laugh. As Rocco said, you would never find his picture on the cover of Gentleman's Quarterly. But all of that was secondary to having the time to spend around him. And it was always great. He would call me from downstairs when Rocco would come to town and he wanted me to meet Rocco and all the other people that were involved in him. And we would talk sometimes, and I want to talk Broadway and he'd want to talk baseball. And I said, "This ain't going to work." And Amanda is we love to go to the theater, and we go up to play the Mets and the Yankees, and I'm working every night, and she's going to Broadway shows every night. And one show in particular, she came back from New York that she saw that she raved about, and the show was Memphis. And she couldn't wait to call Rick and tell him how thoroughly knocked out she was by the story, by the music, and everything. Rick thought that show stunk. And they got into a big-time argument. She thought it was wonderful. He said, "It'll never make it." How many Tonys did that show win, Rocco?
They did pretty well.
They did very well. And God bless him, he wrote Amanda a letter and said, "I guess I got to find something else to do besides my day job." He said, I thought the show was rubbish. He said, obviously you were right and I was wrong. And we're going to get we found the letter today, and we're going to get it framed, and we're going to hang it in our house for all time. We have, all three of us, gotten through this without really getting all worked up. I speak about him in the present. I'll never speak about him in the past tense, because he's going to be with all of us, those who have had the pleasure of knowing him through the years and have benefited by the fact that we could call Rick Steiner a friend. I'm reminded of what my partner of 31 years used to say when he signed off every night, and we dedicate this to Rick today. He's rounding third, and he's heading for home. Thank you.
I think we should hear for one more person. Meredith, our daughter.
So Rocco, I too spent some time trying to figure out what song was appropriate for Uncle Rick. And this morning we were all jamming out to Big River in the bathroom. If the bunch of us all stick together and we all go down as one, we could be highway robbers. We could be just out to have fun. All together now we are the boys. All together now forever and always. All together now we are the boys. We're together forever and always. If the bunch of us all, now listen, because here's the part I like best. If we all got a hold of some horses, we could ride like the boys out west. We could hoot, shoot, and we could holler. We could ride like the devil wind, and then go back to the cove, sleep all day, and do it the next night again. That song to me is my Uncle Rick, especially the part about sleeping all day, the next day. But he was the co-ringleader of a band of boys as thick as thieves, known as the Steiners, and of course, his extended family that you heard from, who, as everyone said, truly lived his life his own way. I'm Meredith, for those of you I haven't met. I'm Rick's niece, by way of my mom marrying my dad, Corky, when I was 4. And if you are one of the very few women lucky enough to be let into this band of boys, and let me tell you, life with the real Huck Finn was as every bit as magical as a Broadway show opening night. I remember my very first opening I went to with Uncle Rick. I remember what I wore. I remember holding his hand as we walked to the very front of the theater, and we just kept going to the front, and I was so excited. And that night was the beginning of a question that I asked all the time whenever our family would get together. And I would look at Corky and my mom and I would say, is Uncle Rick gonna be there? Because that night I fell in love with him, as I think we all have. He is as charming as he is loyal. He is brilliant as he is witty. He is as legendary as any character he helped bring to life on the stage. And Ricky, you might have to help me with this one, but if our dad, Corky, is Luke Skywalker, the straight and narrow rock that keeps this band of brothers grounded, Rick is the Han Solo. There's no S. It's not Hans. It's Han Solo. Adding glitter and the unexpected, and the occasional eye roll when our dad is making jokes, because he does make them. And for everyone sitting in the front row, we are together forever and always. I love you, Uncle Rick.
All together now, we are the boys. All together forever and always. All together now, we are the boys. We're together forever and always.
Well, all of our speakers knocked it out of the park. To close, sharing our memories and stories following the burial and moving on to our childhood home on Rose Hill Avenue, beginning around 4:30. Give us some time to get there, and Rick's Rose Hill Production Company and the opportunity to get everything set up. Jan, Sparky, and Connie. We thank you. We'd love to see you there, and what a tribute to a wonderful guy and friend.
It falls to someone to be the straight man. And so we return to the words of tradition. To everything there is a season, a time for everything under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant, a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to throw stones, a time to gather stones. A time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. I ask us now all to please rise for the memorial prayer. El malei rachamim shochein bamromim, hamasei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, im kedoshim utorim kazoaharakia mazhirim, et nishmat Richard Steiner, shahalach le'olamo. Ba'al harachamim yasterehu beseta kanafav le'olamim, v'yitzror b'tzror chayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachlato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. O compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence unto Rick Steiner, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. The Lord is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And we all say, Amen.
The friends are welcome to call on the family from 4:30 until 6:30 at Rick's home in North Avondale, 4044 Rose Hill Avenue. Now those of you who are to serve as pallbearers, please come forward.
Adonai roi Eloach sar, binot deshe yar bitseni al me minachot yenachaleni nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni bama aglet tzedek lama'an shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, tishantam vashimen roshi kosiravaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdafuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shafti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters, he restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.